Hey guys, we're going to go ahead and do some of your problems that are due today. Okay, I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'm going to go through some of them. Okay, hopefully this helps you out. So start off with number 13. All right, what is the range of f of x? So remember, the range is how tall from the bottom to the top. So we want to use these numbers to talk about the range. So what we're going to do is first start at the bottom. What is the smallest distance at the bottom? If you look, our range starts at, let me try to get this line in there, at -3. So our range is -3. And then our top range, our top range is 10. Okay, so remember, the range is using the output line. And this is our output line. This is our input line. So we're looking at the output lines, and our range is -3 to 10. So we're going to use interval notation. So -3, remember, since we have a dot on -3, so if you look, -3, there's actually, the graph is on -3 line. So that's going to be a bracket at -3. And then it also is a dot, or part of our graph is on the 10 line. So it's going to be another bracket on the 10 line. Okay, that is your range. All right, f of 8. Remember, this is our input. And we're trying to figure out our output. So if our inputs is 8, so let's go to the input line. Let me erase this. So our input line is the x. So we're going to our input line and we're looking for 8. So we're going to put a line at 8. So here's 8. Let's put a line there. Okay. And what I want to try to figure out is, on this input line of 8, do I have the graph crossing? And you'll see it crosses right here. So this is the input I'm looking for. So that means I have an input of 8, and my output is going to be, now we look at our output line, 3. Okay, it's just like writing a point. So my input is 8, which makes my output 3. All right, now number 15, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to look for the output and try to find the input. Okay, so we want the output of -4. So let's see, output of -4. So we're going to the output line. And we're looking for -4. Here it is, and we're going to draw a line through -4. Okay, so if you look, -4, there is no input for -4. My -4 never crosses, so I don't have an output for -4. So that means x, there is no input when we have an output of -4, is no solution. There is no input for -4. Okay? All right, 16. So let me erase this really quick. Okay, so we're going to do the decreasing, which means we want to know when my graph from left to right is going down. So as I mentioned before, we're going to section this off using vertical lines. So I'm going to section the starting point. Section every time I change direction. So we're going down and we're still going down. So in essence, I really don't need this one here because we're not changing directions. We're continuing to go down until here. This is where we change direction, so that's why I put a section here. boom, and then we change directions here. Okay, so we're going down now and continue to go down, and then I'm going to section off here because this is where my graph ends. All right, so don't think that we're putting a vertical line at each dot. We're putting vertical lines at changings of direction. So this section's going down, this section's going up, and this section's going back down. So we want to put it, and I'm going to use interval notation. When is my graph going down? From left to right, it starts going down at -8. That's my first section. So it starts going down at -8. And it continues to go down until we hit 0. Okay? But that's not the only place it goes down. So we then go up, and then it starts going down at 3. And it stops entirely at 10. Okay, so let me just highlight that for you really quick. So we're going down here in this section and in this section. And that's what those lines are talking about. Okay, so we did that. Let's look for, let's see. Cool. So we're going to erase that. I thought I could use those lines again, but I can't. So let me erase this. All right, let's shoot over to 17. What is the maximum of fx? So in other words, what is the highest point of this? And remember, fx is our vertical line. So we want to know what's the highest point. So think about your range. What was the highest point of your range? So the maximum is going to be 10. Okay. X-intercepts. Let's check that out. Number 18, x-intercepts is where does my graph touch or cross the x-axis. So if you look, it's 0 and 9. So my x-intercepts are points. So the first point is 0, 0. And my next point is 9, 0. So remember, x-intercepts and y-intercepts have to be in point form. So my x-intercepts are 0, 0 and 9, 0. Okay? All right, if fx is equal to 0, then find x. So again, this is my output. If my output is 0, what is my input? So that's what we're trying to find, our x. So let's look to the output line and put a line at 0. So output line, let's put a line at 0. So here's my output line, and 0 is here. So it looks somewhat like this. And my output line is going, or my inputs, if you notice, I actually have two. I have, my graph is crossed here, and my graph crosses here. Okay, so what is my x value where my graph crosses? It crosses at 0 and 9. So x actually has two answers here. My input has two answers. So my input is 0, when my output is 0. My input here is 9 when my output is 0. So my x answers are x is equal to 0 and x is equal to 9. And once you make this connection, notice that these are also my x-intercepts here, 9 and 0, 9 and 0. So when your output's 0, you're really finding your x-intercepts. F of 2. So I want to know when my input is 2. So input, and I need to find my output. All right, so let's look at, we're now looking for the input line of 2. So input line is this line, and we're going to put a line at 2. Okay, so now we want to check, where does my graph cross? That input line of 2, it crosses here, so that means my input is 2, and my output is, so we go to the output line, is 4. So the answer to my output is 4. (21). Again, same idea. My output is -3. I need to find my input. Okay, so I'm going to go to my output line now, which is my vertical line. So here's my output line, and we're looking for -3, which is right here. So I'm going to put a line through -3. There's my output. Okay, does my graph ever cross the output of -3? And it does, it's here. So my output is -3. What's my input? So we go to the input line. My input is 10. So x is equal to 10. Okay. All right. This next problem, I guess it's part of 21. It's kind of numbered weird. But what parts of the domain are nonlinear? So what this really means is not a line. Okay, so we're going to go to the domain. Remember, domain is your input line. So let me remind you. Domain represents your input line. So just another way of saying it. Output is your range line. Okay, so let's look at the graph. And we want to look at the part of the graph that's not a straight line. So right from here to here, straight line. But this graph is a curve. This is not a straight line. So I'm going to section that off. I'm no longer a straight line starting here and ending there. The rest of it, straight line, straight line. So this part of my graph is a curve. All right? So this would be called non-linear. Okay? And we want to use the domain to tell everybody my non-linear part starts at -4 and ends at 3. Okay? So we're going to go and do interval notation. Starts at -4 and ends at 3. And that is our domain of non-linear. Okay, what is the domain of f of x? So domain is, again, we're going to look at our input line, our domain line. Where does my graph start and where does it end? So if you look, my graph starts here. So I'm going to put a line through my input of where my graph starts there. And it ends here. Okay, So that is going to be my domain. Remember, range is the opposite. We use this, top and bottom and top. Now we're using left and right for domain. So where does it start? It starts at -8. And we're going to put a bracket because -8 is actually, that line has a part of the graph on it. As you can see, the graph touches my line. So that's a bracket. And then it ends, where does it end on the right? It ends at 10, and because it touches, it's part of the, it's a bracket. Okay? All right. Estimate the rate of change from -8 to -4. Okay, remember, this is the other notation we got to be comfortable with. So we're going to go from -8 to -4 on the X line, or the input line. Okay, so I'm going to draw those lines in from -8 to -4. -8, -4. So let's put that in. So here's -8, -4. So when they say rate of change, believe it or not, is a fancy word for slope. Okay, rise over run. So what we're going to do is find the rise over run. So let's check this out. So I want to go from this beginning point to this ending point. Okay, so I want to check, how do I get from this dot to this dot? So I'm going to start here, and that says I rise -2. So if you look, I'm going down -2. Okay, down -2. Let me make that a little cleaner. So down -2. And then I have to go over 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1, 2, 3. I have to go over 4. So my rise is -2. My run is +4. So if I do that in slope form, it's -2 over 4, which we can reduce by 2, and that gives me -1 over 2. So my rate of change is -1/2, and that's kind of how they're basically asking for the slope. Where is fx positive? Okay, so this is very similar to the problem we did our last Zoom meeting. Okay, we want to take a peek here, looking at our horizontal line. And we know that, remember, this is our output line, or our fx line. And we know over here is we have negative outputs, and above we have positive output. So we want to know when this is positive or above water. If you remember me talking about that, we want to know, when is my graph above water, above the line. Okay, so we want to know when it's positive. So let's look. Using our input line as measurements, we are above water starting at -8. So we are above water at -8. Okay, and then we are still above water until we get here. We're actually, how can I say this? We're like even with the water. So we stop being above water here. Okay, for a split second. So at this exact moment, we are not above water, but right after, we're back above water. And then we stop being above water here. Okay, so how would I read this? We are above water from -8 to 0, and from 0 to 9. So we are above at -8, and I put a bracket there because at -8 we're actually above water, so that means it's a bracket. And then we are no longer above water at 0. So at actual 0, I'm going to put parentheses because we are not above water there. We are even with the water. And then we go back above water starting at 0, but again, we're not above water at 0. We're not positive. And we are not positive at 10. We just stopped being above water at 10. So 10 is not above water, it's even with the water. Okay, so that's why these are parentheses. We're even with the water at 0. We're even with the water at 10, but in between there, we're above water. We're above water at -8, but not at 0, but in between there, we're above water. Okay, so that's when f of x is positive. Okay, f of x equals 8, very similar to these problems. Okay, so if you look, here's my line, f of x equals 8. You actually have two answers again. So my output is 8. We have two answers. I'll let you handle that one. When is f of x negative? So let's check this out. Let's do 26. When is f of x negative? So kind of doing the same thing. And if you notice, we're not negative at all until we get to this line here, which is 9. And we are negative from 9 to 10 only. So that's when my graph is below water. So in this little section here, which I'm going to highlight in purple. So this is, that little section is where we're negative. So let's write that in, from 9 to 10. Okay, so we'll do it here. So we're not above or below water. We're not negative at 9. So that's why it's parentheses. But at 10, we are. So that's why it's bracket. Okay, minimum of f of x. Okay, so the minimum of f of x is the lowest point. So think of range. So let me erase this here. So when we talk about maximum or minimum, we want the lowest point of our graph. So check this out. The lowest point is this. And where does it cross on the range or output? And that looks like it's -3. So my minimum of fx, -3. And again, how do I know to use this line, the vertical line? Because it says fx. Fx is my fx line. Okay? And I'll let you do f of 7. I don't know, the numbers are off a little bit, but I don't even think you have to do that. Okay, so that's pretty much it. I'll let you answer these for this problem. Okay, good luck. Take your quiz tomorrow and we'll get it going.